What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Met Central podcast. This is episode 50, as we are going to discuss the series that just occurred as the New York Mets swept the St. Louis Cardinals in a four-game set. The first time since call us the Ranger fans that we are, because you know how last year there was all those comparables to 94. Well, this is the first time they swept the Cardinals in a four-game set since 1986. And now they head into a series with a lot of momentum against their division rival in the Philadelphia Phillies, which that's going to be a huge series coming up. Even though it's early, all the games still matter by the end of it. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fare against a very quality opponent, which is something that we're definitely interested in because of, certain questions that we've had about this team over the past few weeks. We're going to talk about it all, though, the series here, the series coming up, as well as a couple of other things. But be sure to leave a like on your way into the show. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. In the chat right now, we are going to get to your comments, your questions, all that stuff. You're not being ignored if we don't pull up your comment right away. We are just trying to only bring up the comments that are really relevant to the conversation that we are having. If not, we will try to pull up some of your earlier comments later in the show and discuss certain topics that you may have suggestions for, or just that you want our opinions on in general. We will get to all of it. But yeah, feeling great now after the series, but we got a lot to get into. Matt, how are we feeling after the Mets sweep the Cardinals, which you said 3 out of 4. I said 2-2. Well, you got better than both of us predicted.
Yeah, I mean, it's always great to sweep a series, right? And now you take a look at it. I get that it's very early in the season. We're not even through April, but the fact that this team is 15-7 right now and pretty much like they still haven't hit their stride yet. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, because I recall the last podcast we did when we were talking about the Twin series, and the biggest problem that we had with that series was not only that that they lost the series 2 out of 3 to a bad Twins team, but was the fact that the Mets played a poor fundamental game of baseball in that whole series. And the one thing for me, they really cleaned up the fundamentals in this series. I thought the defense was a lot sharper. I thought the base running was decent, apart from a Luis Angel Acuna mistake in the second game of the series. Pitching again was good. Starting pitching wise, they got pretty much really good length again. I mean, you had both Clay Holmes and Griffin Canning go out there and give you 6 innings respectively. And then even in the games where they didn't get 6 innings, Sango went out there, pitched well, gave you 5 2/3, and then Peterson pitched pretty well and gave you 5 1/3 as well. And then the bullpen, couple shaky moments here and there, but like we were saying, for the most part, I mean, the Mets still have a top bullpen ERA in baseball right now. And like we said, like, this bullpen's not going to be perfect. There's going to be times where they're a little bit shaky. They're going to give up runs, but for the most part, they were still solid and reliable. And then even for the offense, like, the offense hasn't fully clicked yet. Obviously, we would like it to be a little bit better in terms of, bringing in guys with runners in scoring position, but they were a bit better this series. A lot better ABs than the previous series in Minnesota. But I mean, yeah, 15-7, first in the division, and up 2 games on the Phillies, and now we have a big 3-game set against the Phillies. So listen, I get it's early, but the fact that now you only play 13 games against your division rivals, and the fact that the Mets and the Phillies are going to be fighting to the end of the season for first place in the NL East, it's a big 3-game set, and the Mets just got to continue to play good baseball.
Yeah, especially at Citi Field, since the record is what it is there. But let's not waste any time. Let's recap all of these games here. I'm just going to give the scoring breakdowns, and then we'll talk about, each game individually, certain performances that we liked, didn't like, all that stuff. So in the first game, you had Griffin Canning on the mound for the Mets. He faced trouble in that first inning, but thankfully was able to get out of the jam. In the bottom of the first, Lindor would get a leadoff single. Soto grounded into a double play, so unfortunately the Mets would waste the leadoff base runner there. But in the bottom of the second, Mark Vientos showing what we have been waiting for him to show, and that is some power. He hits his first home run of the season going the opposite way to make it a 1-0 baseball game, and the Mets would not stop there that inning as Starling Marte had a double, and with 2 outs, Brett Beatty, can you believe it, gets an RBI single to make it 2-0. Tyrone Taylor would get a hit, and then Lindor would drive a run in of his own, 2 runs actually, to make it a 4-0 game. Unfortunately, the following inning, Canning got into a little bit of trouble, and it ended up making things a little bit more difficult there, but got out of it with limited damage, as it was only 4-1 by the end of the inning, and the Mets would do a good job. The bullpen would do a great job holding on to win this baseball game by a final score of 4-1. And then in game two, they had they had to go with David Peterson there on the mound. He was looking good really early. Bottom of the first, Pete Alonso had a triple. Unfortunately, they did not drive him in. In the second inning, though, you had some troubles from David Peterson. But again, similar to what we've seen from this pitching staff, when these guys get in the trouble, the biggest positive is that it's not a lot of damage. Pa has had a RBI single, which made it 1-0, but that was really it for the damage. Unfortunately, though, in the top of the fourth, he faced more trouble. Jordan Walker got an RBI single, which made it a 2-0 game. But then fast forward to the fifth inning, Tyrone Taylor would drive in Brett Beatty after Beatty had a double. Ty 3 bags, Ty 2 bags. I don't know what you want to call him right now because you could call him either one. He ends up getting an RBI triple to make it a 2-1 game. And then Juan Soto coming through with an RBI to tie the game up at 2 as he's starting to heat up. Nolan Arenado would drive in Contreras to make it a 3-2 game in the sixth inning. But the Mets, credit to them responding as Mark Vientos goes yard on back-to-back days to make it a 3-3 game. And then fast forward later, Torrens with a huge RBI double in the eighth inning to drive in the run as Mark Vientos had just such a good day at the plate. And Torrens gets that double. Unfortunately, though, Braziban would not make it easy as Donovan ends up hitting a home run to tie it up at 4. But then there was no doubt that Francisco Lindor was going to do something as he won the game with a solo shot to make it 5-4. In game 3, Kodai Senga would take the bump and he would cruise through pretty much every single inning. There was a little bit of trouble in the second inning, but outside of that, really cruised through most of the outing. In the third inning, Acuna got a leadoff double, and the Mets almost wasted it, but Juan Soto would drive in the run to make it 1-0. And then Alonso would get a double, which made it 2-0. Fast forward a little bit further into the outing here for Senga. Unfortunately, he ended up struggling a little bit in the sixth inning, which caused his outing to be short on top of the pitch limit. But thankfully, Reed Garrett comes in and does Reed Garrett things as he usually does. And yeah, Pete Alonso had a solo shot in the eighth. The Mets shut things down, even though AJ Minter was a little bit shaky in that outing. Still did not allow a run, and the Mets hold on the win. Diaz looking good there. And then in the final game here, you would have Clay Holmes on the mound for the Mets, which he got into trouble early, similar to that Miami start, got out of it. And then similar to that game against Miami as well, Francisco Lindor with a leadoff home run to make it 1-0 early. In the bottom of the third, the Mets would get some traffic on the bases. Soto would hit a sacrifice fly, some good base running from Taylor to steal a run there. And then in the fifth inning, Pete Alonso would drive in Juan Soto with an RBI single after Soto also was able to advance on a wild pitch. The sixth inning, a little bit of trouble for Clay Holmes, but again, limits the damage, and Brandon Nimmo with an outstanding catch in left field to rob Jordan Walker of a home run. Unfortunately, though, the bullpen had to be the B unit with the lack of arms available. Danny Young and Jose Budo got into a little bit of trouble, but the Mets respond as they got traffic on the bases, and with 2 outs, Brandon Nimmo would get a huge RBI single, continuing his amazing day. And then the bottom of the eighth, the Mets get a much-needed cushion here as Acuna gets a double, and then Ty 2 bags ends up getting a double as well. Juan Soto with the RBI to make it 7-3. And then Nootbaar would end up making it 7-4 as Stanek faced the most trouble he has all season long, but he works out of it and the Mets win. So, yeah, definitely a lot of positive, obviously, because of the fact that they swept. Most of it, I would say, comes on the pitching end. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, definitely the pitching, and I think also the other big positive is that the 3 top guys in our lineup, Soto, Lindor, and Pete Alonso, that they had a really good that all 3 of them had a really good series as well. And I think the other positive you got to take from it, and we'll talk about it more, but the fact that I know Mark Vientos got hurt in the third game, it looks like he's fine though, just because Mendy said that it was a groin issue, but it wasn't. They don't have too big of a worry on it, but the fact that Mark Vientos looks like he's finally starting to heat up, which is huge for this Mets lineup because they need Mark Vientos at full power, if they want to be one of the top teams in the MLB and, be a contender once they get into the playoffs.
Yeah. That was the biggest thing is that, especially in that game one, it was good to see Mark Vientos and in general this series. It sucks that he had to get pulled from that one game because of the groin issue, which thankfully is day to day, it looks like. But Yeah, just to see him start to turn a corner has been huge, and we've been saying for a couple weeks now that he's starting to get there. You just got to give it patience, and I mean Francisco Lindor, he had a little bit. There was like one rough game there in the series, but outside of that, I mean, he was still just on the money most of the series. I don't know what it is. Like I said on the post game, maybe it's just him playing in front of the home crowd, but he is really finding his rhythm, and it was nice to see a lot of positives as well from the offense, even though they could be a little bit better with runners in scoring position, being more opportunistic. But the at bats were so much better than they were in that last series, and that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I thought the ABs were, I mean, like you said, like I said at the beginning, they were definitely a lot better. I thought that, they were working pitch counts a lot more. They were actually getting big time extra base hits to bring in guys with runners in score position. Like we were saying, still not perfect, but definitely there were some major improvements. And like I said, it definitely does help when, Lindor, Soto, Pete, Vientos, those guys at the top of the lineup. I mean, even Brandon Nimmo, I didn't think Nimmo had a great series, but also the fact that you saw him in the final game not only rob Jordan Walker of a home run to keep Clay Holmes from only giving up I think it was 2 earned runs in that outing, but then also coming up big in the bottom of the seventh, getting that big RBI single to put the Mets in front 7-3 after Jose Budo comes in and gives up the lead. I'm not sorry, not give up the lead, but he gives up the lead to tie it. So the fact that Nimmo, maybe hopefully that last game of the series that gets him to heat up, because once again, like we said with Vientos, how the Mets need his bat to be productive. The Mets also need Brandon Nimmo to be out there and be productive, because that's the guy who's getting paid $20 million a year. And the Mets signed into a long-term deal because they thought he would be a big cornerstone piece of this team. And he definitely struggled to start the season, but like I said, hopefully that last game really sparks something on him to where he could now go not completely on a tear, but that he looks a lot better than he has recently.
Yeah, because that's the other thing where, that's still where I have concerns between that and the DH position. I still have a lot of concerns. Jesse Winker at least put some competitive at bats together in the final game, but an 0 for 3 day with 3 strikeouts. I'm not loving the production there. I think it's very clear that Acuna has won the second base job if, that was not already clear. It was also nice to see some production from Tyrone Taylor throughout this series because they've been lacking just so much in the bottom of the lineup outside of really Torrens, who didn't have as good of a series outside of, that one huge hit that he had. He wasn't as good as he's been. So it was nice to see the bottom of the lineup really pick each other up there with Tyrone Taylor having that big series. And then on top of that, just getting the production they did from Acuna.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, for me, Luis Acuna has fully earned the second base role. And I mean, listen, like for Beatty, he definitely did show some glimpses in the series. He did get a couple nice base hits, even though they weren't off the greatest pitchers in the world. But I mean, at least he's getting the results. At least we can say that for him. I mean, he also did make a very nice play when he came in for Vientos in the third game of the series where he threw. I forgot who the runner was going to home plate, but he threw him out to save a run. But yeah, I mean, for me, Acuna is just, and we talked about it a little bit on the last podcast, but with Luis Acuna, the reason why we like him is because he's just a really good, young, energetic, dynamic player. And I get it. He definitely does make some boneheaded mistakes from time to time. I mean, like I talked about in the second game where, he's on second base after he comes into pinch hit. I'm sorry, he comes into pinch run for Vientos. He steals second. Nimmo hits the ball to left field, to the left part of the infield. And for some reason, because typically, in baseball, and you're taught from this at a very young age, whenever the ball's hit to the left side of the infield when you're on second base, you don't run. And listen, I get Acuna is a very good, fast, dynamic little player, but for me, it's just he just has to improve a little bit on his situational awareness, because again, if that's just a regular common third baseman, then I think he probably could have beaten it out. But because it's Nolan Arenado, and this is a guy who, okay, sure, it's not the same Nolan Arenado as he's been in the last couple of years, like what we especially saw in his first couple years in St. Louis, and the last couple of years that he was in Colorado. But this is still a platinum glove, gold glove winning third baseman. And listen, he made give credit to Nolan Arenado. He made the nice play. Obviously, Acuna just I mean, he initially beat him to the back, but he just slid off, and Arenado was there to complete the tag. But I mean, yeah, that's a play where you can't make it, and obviously, he's had his trouble with sliding into bases as well. I mean, Keith Hernandez will bring it up that he hates the head in slide to second base. So we don't want to get Keith started on that one. But I mean, just overall, I mean, Acuna's looked a lot better. I mean, his ABs have been a lot better from where they were at the start of the season. He's making good hard contact. He's getting extra base hits. Like as I mentioned, whenever he gets on base, either through a single walk or when he's a pinch runner, he's always a threat to steal a base. So, I mean, for me, I think it's pretty clear. And obviously, because we got the news, I know Mendy said that today, actually, that Alvarez and McNeil were going to be at Citi Field today to get reevaluated. And they're not back yet. They're still going to go out there and get some more at bats in their rehab starts, but they're pretty close to coming back. And I mean, yeah, for me, and then there's also the talk that Luis Acuna, when McNeil comes back, Acuna might get even reps at center field, which I'm not the greatest fan of, considering that he has a small stature. So for a guy playing center field, you don't really want that. But I mean, if he's going to play well, then obviously you got to find a way to keep his bat in the lineup. But I mean, Acuna's just been a really good little spark so far in the series and this season as well.
I think the best situation at this point, we've really discussed this the most, is that their best option, I would say, when those guys start to get healthy, is to let one of the guys that's already in the field just DH, or to DH one of the guys coming back. Because at this point right now, none of the DHs are giving the production that you need at all. So at this point, I would rather, instead of putting McNeil out in center field or having Acuna out in center field, I would personally rather just see one of those guys DH, preferably McNeil, because I think Acuna is a better glove at second base. I would rather just see Jeff McNeil come back in DH when he's here, because you're not getting anything really from Winker. You're not getting anything from Marte, and not even competitive at bats from him, which we'll discuss more as the show progresses. But none of these guys are winning that job, and you're allocating nearly 30 million to two guys that are not giving any production as DHs. The only thing that I get with why you maybe wouldn't want to go that route is because of the fact that then you're limiting yourself with your bench versatility, and you have two guys that really can't play the field well on your bench, and it kind of makes things a little difficult. You have three guys who play the outfield, and then your backup catcher and Senger who are on the bench, because you don't have enough infield versatility. And if heaven forbid something happened, although Ozakar probably, I'd imagine, is sent down once McNeil is healthy, so maybe that changes things a little bit. But that's where I'm at right now, where I would go the route of just letting McNeil DH when he comes back over anything.
I mean, yeah, that's definitely an option that I could see it. I mean, also the fact, because I mean, I remember some people were bringing it up when I did the post game show on the first game, and even we've brought it up before, on the last couple of podcasts before. But when Alvarez comes back, you go the route of carrying three catchers, and I think that's a thing that makes sense, because I mean, look, Hayden Sanger, he's not the greatest player in the world, but I mean, to be fair, for what we expected from him, I think he's overperformed for our standards. He's gotten a couple really good base hits in a short time being here. He's also made a couple nice plays behind the plate. So him as as a catcher on the bench, fine. But then Luis Torrens, and listen, we've talked about it before, but Torrens has been a really valuable piece for this team so far, especially considering that the bottom of the lineup has been such a huge struggle for the Mets. Torrens has really stepped up with a lot of clutch base hits at his time so far. Batting down there in the order, and then also the thing that you got to remember. And we the one really big complaint that we have about Alvarez is, like, sure, he's good behind the plate, and he's really good at framing and stealing strikes for the pitchers. But the one thing that Alvarez has really lacked on so far in his short time in the major leagues is throwing opposing runners out whenever they try to steal second base. And that's one of Luis Torrens' specialty right now, because not only is he hitting and he's good behind the plate, but it seems like whenever someone is trying to steal second base, Luis Torrens is always there with a good throw to steal to catch him out at second base. So, and then if you have Alvarez, who we're trying to get him back into game shape, and then just let him develop on his hitting, because really that's the one thing that we really want to see from Alvarez is his overall raw power and his hitting ability. So I think carrying three catchers, I think that's not the worst idea. I mean, probably for me, I'd say that's probably the best idea, because you keep the defense of Torrens behind the plate. You have Sanger, who's fine, who if you have to play him, cool. And then you have Alvarez, who is still a good young talent, who's still looking to develop his hitting tools. And then he's also solid behind the plate.
The only problem with that, and I mean, I agree that that's the route I would go down, because this is where it leads to the problem that if you have Alvarez and McNeil come back, it's like, who do you get rid of then at that point? Because the two obvious guys to me right now are Senger and Ozakar. Because if you were to ask me, though, I would carry three catchers and just cut the bait with Starling Marte. And I think
Yeah.
that goes without saying, as the resident Starling Marte hater on the program here. But that's the route I'm not disagreeing that it's the route I'd go down. It's just the problem is that you either have to go with less pitchers then at that point, or you're going to have to go the route of admitting that I should say admitting it wrong because of the fact that Marte's on the last year of the deal, but you either have to admit the wrong with extending Winker or you have to get rid of Marte. Like there's no in between then at that point if they're going to carry three catchers.
Yeah, that's the only tough place that you're pretty much put in. I mean, for me, you would agree, I would agree, but I think the Mets have to give Starling Marte the Robinson Cano treatment and just DFA him, because he really provides no value. I mean, sure, like he hit the big home run in Miami to give him a run in that second series of the season so far, and he's come up with the occasional base hit here and there, but really, what value is Starling Marte providing? And I mean, sure, like you could give me the fact that he's a good clubhouse presence, and he's a veteran, and I get you need that, because look at the fact at how the team reacted to having guys like Jose Iglesias and JD Martinez in the clubhouse last year. I mean, those two. For JD Martinez, even though he didn't perform, second half of the year, he was still a very good positive influence in that clubhouse. But for me, like, and those guys, they weren't making the money that Starling Marte was making. Like for $20 million, you can't tell me that we're gonna keep you around just because you're a good clubhouse presence. Like that is just not good, asset allocation and money allocation. Like for me, like at least the thing with Winker, right? I get Winker hasn't been like the guy that we saw last in the playoffs, but at least for Winker, whenever he's up there, he gives you competitive at bats. And sure, maybe the results haven't been there most of the time. I mean, I think his last couple of at bats, he's been a little bit of unlucky, considering that he's hit the ball hard a couple times. It's found defenders in either the infield or the outfield. So, and listen, that's baseball. Sometimes you really can't do anything about that. But like again, and then for Winker again, like at least like you don't love his glove, but at least you could rely on him if you need him to go out there and play the outfield. With Marte, I don't trust him one bit in the outfield, because we saw from last year. I mean, look how many errors and mistakes he made in the outfield last year. So, I mean, for me, like Marte just serves no purpose on this team, and I think the sooner you cut him, I think overall it's the better for this team going forward.
Yeah, it's just like they're going to have to one way or another, and this is really what it comes down to in my opinion, one way or another, they're gonna have to cut the bait with one of Winker or Marte, or maybe even both, come the trade deadline. Because if you were to ask me right now, like the biggest thing they need to do is get a legit DH come the deadline to lengthen this lineup, and I would say arguably that's the biggest need. Like I know everyone was talking ace at the beginning of the season, and I know it's April and it's maybe early to talk about that stuff, but if you were to ask me right now, and even just projecting down the road, I would say that it's going to be their biggest need come the deadline, because you just can't go out there with these two guys as your DHs. Even if Winker, rises in the playoffs, he's still not playing every day. We saw it last year where they still platoon DH'd him in the playoffs, even though he was hitting the way he was. So again, it's not like he'd even play every day. And you're going to have to admit at some point that it's probably the better idea to, go in a different direction there. And then that opens a spot on your bench also to add some help there for someone maybe that's a little bit better defensively, someone that can maybe come in and pinch run and steal bags and stuff like that. So that's just my opinion there. And, obviously we both just said that we agree that it would be the route to go, especially with Marte, who isn't showing any competitive at bats and showing any signs of just really anything out there being left in the tank. Like, he could steal bases. That's the one thing that he's good at, but that doesn't matter that you could steal bases when you're not on base. I mean, he's got a 273 on base percentage right now.
I mean, even just the monetary value makes sense. Like Winker, like sure, like we said, he's not giving you the production of what he was last year in the playoff time, but still, he's only making $7 million. And we also bring up the fact that Winker and Marte, they obviously platoon depending on what pitcher's on the mound compared to a lefty and a righty. But even then, whenever a lefty's on the mound, I'd give the nod to Winker just because I mean. We talked about it before that Winker's not the greatest against lefties, but his ABs against lefties have actually been pretty solid this year. I mean, the the game time triple that he hit in the second game of the Blue Jay series, that was off a lefty. So I think just for me, like monetary value and overall playing style, and the fact that Winker at least can provide you his glove in the outfield, even though it's not the greatest. Like I think Winker's the much more valuable player, and I think just getting rid of Marte would just be the smartest idea. And I know we both agree on that, but I mean I think that's just obvious.
Yeah. Like, it's getting to a point where, we're talking about wanting Winker to get the reps even lefty lefty. There's no value then left with Star Marte. There's literally nothing he's bringing to the table to where you could say, yeah, you know what? Keep him around. There's just nothing there at this point. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that before we segue over to a different conversation because there's still obviously a lot to talk about in a 4 game set here.
Now we can move on.
So let's talk about some pitching performances that were definitely positives. Griffin Canning, 6 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts. Definitely unfortunate that the pitch count got high at certain points, but still a lot of encouraging stuff from Griffin Canning, especially with the slider. What are your overall thoughts of his outing?
Yeah, I thought Canning was really good. I mean, apart from his first inning where he kind of struggled with his command and he kind of got into a little bit of trouble. I believe it was first and second in that first inning, but he got out of it. But overall, after that, I mean, he pretty much settled down and flew through 6 really strong innings at the end of the game. And overall, I mean, I really like his final stat line: 6 innings, three hits given up, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 8 Ks. Brings his season ERA down to a 3.43 ERA. I mean, the one thing though that I really found intriguing about Canning's overall, pitch types and how he utilized his arsenal that last start was he went very four seam heavy, which is pretty odd because and we've talked about it before with Canning starts that so far through his first couple starts, he's gone very slider reliant, and we even saw that in spring training where he went very heavy on his secondary stuff and really cut back on the fastball usage. Now, I'm not sure if maybe that was just a matchup thing and that the Cardinals just struggle hitting fastballs. But I mean, to be fair with Canning, like we talked about it before, how his fastball was his worst pitch. But to be fair, I mean, his fastball looked pretty good the last outing. And of course, he mixed it with the slider and the changeup ball, but threw the four seamer 45 times, slider 27 times, the changeup 18 times, cutter 5, knuckle curve 5, sinker twice. And I mean, even then with the four seamer, 22 swings, 7 whiffs, 13 swings, 6 whiffs on the slider, and then 10 swings and 3 whiffs on the changeup. And the one thing that I really liked about his fastball too was that the velo was a little bit up as well. I mean, his yearly average right now on Savant says it's a 93.4. He topped out at about 94.9 miles an hour on the fastballs last outing. So the fact that the four seamer is looking a bit better, I mean, that's pretty encouraging. And listen, I still don't think that Canning should be relying on his four seamer, as his number one pitch. But if there's gonna be times where he has control of it and he feels comfortable with it, and he has the confidence to go out there and throw it a lot of times to get swings and misses on that, then listen, that's just another reliable pitch that he has in his back pocket in his arsenal. And again, this is something that we talked about with the Mets pitching lab, that they're making these small little adjustments with the pitchers, and while they may be small, the results are really working in their favor. So And look, I think we still agree with the fact that, once guys like Minaya and Montas comes back, that Canning's going to move to a long man role in the bullpen, and ultimately we still think that's going to be his best role. But the fact that Canning, he looks better with every single outing. I mean, this is just a really encouraging sign, and just again another positive about the pitching lab and this whole Mets pitching staff overall.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with his fastball that's encouraging is he's getting a lot more rise and a lot more arm side movement on the fastball, which is helping. But I just would love to see him mix the cutter a little
Yeah,
bit more into the arsenal. Like we've talked about it for a bit, that, with the three pitches that he's really throwing here, he might be better suited for being a long man in the bullpen down the road for this team, especially, come later in the season, come playoff time. Griffin Canning could just be getting huge outs for this team in September and October from the pen. But just to help him get through a little bit more volume, which I'll take 6 innings from him because, if you told me going into the season that you would get what you've got from Canning, I think we all would have signed up for this by now. But I'd like to see him try to mix in the cutter a little bit more just to really add another tool there in the toolbox to help generate a little bit more swing and miss stuff. And I get that maybe it's something that he's maybe not as comfortable with. And, there are times throughout the outing where he just wants to stick with what's working. But that's just my opinion, that I would like to see him utilize the cutter a little bit more, because I think that it not only will play well with the four seam, but I think it will play well with the slider as well, just since it has a little bit more rise. uh, you know, that's just my opinion though on that one.
yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I would like to see the cutter used a bit more because obviously, that's a pitch that you could tunnel nicely along with the fastball to throw off opposing hitters. But I mean, listen, for him right now, like the fact that we're getting really good value out of Griffin Canning, and again, this was a guy that last year was statistically one of the worst pitchers in baseball. Gave up, I believe, the most home runs as a starting pitcher in the league last year. And the fact that the Mets signed him to a $4.5 million, deal for a year, and the fact that through about like four starts, he's giving you a 3.43 ERA, and in those starts, he's giving you like some decent length and overall decent value. I mean, overall, I mean, so far, and listen, it's only a couple starts in, but Canning's give you excellent value. And again, this is just what Stearns and the pitching lab do. They find these under the radar guys for cheap, and we had our doubts when we first signed them, but overall, I mean, if you told us that this would be what Canning would be through his four outings when we first signed him, I think we would gladly, we would have shooken David Stearns' hand firmly, and we would have taken that. But Canning's been really good so far.
Speaking of just more good performances, this was definitely not the sharpest from Peterson, but in game two, David Peterson was on the mound, gave 5 1/3 innings, 7 hits, 3 earned runs, 9 strikeouts. What'd you like? What did you not like about his outing there?
Um, let me get up his final pitch line. I mean, I like the fact that he threw up 9 strikeouts. I mean, that's a very
Yeah.
good sign from David Pearson because we always know Pearson as results man. He gets the ground balls, he gets the flyouts for his outs, but I like the 9 strikeouts. That's very encouraging. The one thing I didn't like was some of his location on some of the pitches that, he gave up for hits. I thought, he hung a couple sliders in a couple times. Fastball command maybe could have been a bit better throughout the outing, but overall, I mean, for a final line of 5 1/3, 7 hits, 3 earned runs, 9 strikeouts, no walks, I think that's pretty good for David Pearson. I mean, the only thing that probably hurt him, and the thing that sucked was when the Mets decided to take him out because obviously they obviously tied the game up in the bottom of the fifth inning at 2-2, and then you're like, okay, Pearson, just bulk down here, get to the sixth inning, and give us 6 strong innings. Obviously he gives up the double to Contreras, and at that point he already had a pitch count before entering that sixth inning. So, and I know we talked about it in the group chat, but we're like, okay, give Peterson the sixth, but go on a batter to batter basis. And I think after he gives up that double to Contreras, he should have been out of that game.
Yeah.
But Mendy obviously decided to leave him in, and I get the fact that you want length, but probably the fact that it wasn't Peterson's also sharpest outing, this outing, he should have been out of that game. And obviously, he gives up the single to Arenado. Cardinals retake the lead. And then they keep him in for Brendan Donovan. I get why they kept him in just because it was lefty lefty. And ultimately, he did end up getting he got the out there. And then obviously, Cranach comes in to relieve him. But I mean, yeah, like solid from David Peterson. It's pretty much like what we expect from him. So not terrible, not great, but just solid from him.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that the swing and miss stuff was definitely a lot more noticeable throughout this outing, and that was the most encouraging sign to me. It's just unfortunate that even at points like he was generating some of those ground balls that he usually does. It's just unfortunate that the defense wasn't there the way that it's been for him usually. And when we have the running joke of him being results man, but yeah, overall, I think he was definitely just solid enough to where they were in a position to win the game. And I agree with you, though, they definitely needed to pull him after that first base runner, which I will say there are things like that I haven't loved from Mendoza this year. And really, it's more the fact that there are times he's not even warming a guy up as his pitcher's struggling. And then you got to scramble to get a guy up quickly. But again, like I'm not going to sit here and complain too much about Mendoza's managing because I still think he's a good manager. But it is something that it has been a little bit of a pattern this year that I'm not particularly a fan of. But yeah, I thought David Peterson just gave a really solid outing, which shifts us now to Kodai Senga, who looked like the 2023 version of Senga that we remember. 5 2/3, 3 hits, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. The biggest thing is that he was not walking a lot of batters. The forkball, absolutely disgusting, and the velo was up, which was the biggest thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. He was excellent, and he looked like 2023 Senga. And obviously, we did have some of the concerns going to this year about the fact his health wise, was he the same pitcher that he was in 2023? But so far, I mean, apart from that first start against Miami where he gave up the two hard hits and the home run to start that game, I mean, he's been pretty much solid. Pretty much after that, I mean, like you mentioned, his four seamer and the forkball, those were the two pitches that he went with the most in the outing. Through the four seamer 40 times, through the forkball 26 times. Got plenty of swings and miss. 19 swings on the fastball, one whiff on the four seamer, and then the forkball, which again is his put away pitch. 16 swings, 7 whiffs. Senga looked just pretty good, and then like you said, the fact that his four seamer velocity was good, and that's something that we pointed out in his last start. But I mean today, I mean his yearly average so far on the four seamer was 94.9, and then the fact that last outing he tops out about around 97.4 mile an hours. This is very good signs from Senga, and like you mentioned, also the fact that the walks are down, which was something that he struggled with at the beginning of 2023 when he first came over, and before he made those small little adjustments to his forkball and to his other pitches. But I mean overall, like we talked about it that, when Minaya went down, that, someone from this rotation had to step up and be the ace. And, and it's kind of weird because last year worked the same way because Senga went down early in spring training. We said that eventually someone would have to step up and be the number one pitcher. It was Minaya. And, now the reverse this year, Minaya goes down, Senga is stepping up right now and being that true number one guy. And I'm just excited for the fact that, when Minaya comes back and, if he's anything close to where he was last year, and now you have, Senga and Minaya right there as leading your top two pitchers. And then obviously, we're going to talk about Clay Holmes now. He's been really good. And then maybe the Mets go out there and add another pitcher. I mean, the pitching staff so far has been really good, but I mean, it just seems like with every single outing, everyone's making those little bit slight improvements and, they're just getting better and better and better. So overall, really good signs from Kodai Senga.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too that you were noticing is that he was getting a lot of the swing and miss stuff because of the way that he was really utilizing the fastball, playing off with the forkball there to get arm side movement and generate the swing and misses because they had no idea what was coming. They just had no idea. And I would like to see the strikeout stuff go up, and I'd like to see him get to a spot where he could start to go deep in the baseball games, which again, I get it with the pitch limit. I'm not ridiculing the team for it. I think it's the right way to go about it, especially in April. Save your bullets because you're still winning too. But Yeah, just really encouraging to see Kodai Senga look the way that he has. Do you have anything else to add with him though before we talk about Clay Holmes?
Yeah, I mean, just to finish, I was saying, I mean, like the length part, you would have liked to see him get, that final out and get through the full 6 innings. I think though that if this was later in the year and he doesn't have the pitch limit on him because he finished that outing because obviously he goes into the inning and he gives up the walk to Dupar, gives up a single to Contreras, gets Donovan to a double play, and then he hits Arenado. And when he hits Arenado, he's only at 89 pitches. So, like I said, if this was later down the year where he doesn't have the pitch limit on him, I'm sure that Mendy and the rest of the coaching staff would have let him finish that inning. But the fact that you don't want to push him yet to his full maximum, and you still want to be careful with him, I get it. But like I said, like he's going to get to that point where the leash is going to get taken off of him, and we're going to start to see him pitch deeper into games. But yeah, overall, like we said and you said, like very good outing for Senga.
Yeah, and that brings us over to Clay Holmes, which we told you, patience. Patience,
Hmm.
my friends, and it's only going to get better with Clay Holmes, who gave 6 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. Say what you want about how he got bailed out by the defense at one point, but that was the biggest difference for why he was actually able to go deep in the game, is because he finally had some good defense behind him compared to what he has had all year. This is just what Clay Holmes is. The changeup was absolutely disgusting, and the most encouraging part is that I mentioned this in the post game. Gary, Keith, and Ron were talking about, I think it was mostly Gary talking about how the Cardinals are a good team at hitting changeups. Well, Clay Holmes didn't seem to have any sort of issue with the changeup at all. And I think the biggest positive is what you and I both said yesterday during the post game, and that is the sinker looks better each outing. He looks more confident throwing it. It is helping him tunnel it with the four seam. And now you're seeing the swing and miss stuff. And eventually, this is going to lead to him being a guy that could go 7 to 8 innings. And maybe, do I want to say the A word? I don't know, but I'm gonna wait. I'll hold the bus there. But you're seeing progression, and this is why we preach patience, because like I kept pointing to, and everyone I'm sure was probably getting annoyed by it. I kept pointing to Michael King. It was slow progression for him to get to the pitcher that he is now with the San Diego Padres. It took him like a month and a half to really cement himself as like a bona fide, true top end starter for that team. Are we seeing Holmes become that? Hopefully, but at the very least, there's progression with each start.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like we were saying, like you were saying, like I was saying, like you just got to be patient with Clay Holmes because there was going to be an adjustment period from the start of the season to when we would see him at his peak form as a starting pitcher. And listen, he's been really good his last couple of outings, and he still hasn't reached his peak. I think because and like you mentioned, the fact that that his full arsenal was on point and he was really utilizing every pitch a good amount. I mean, like the one thing that we've been pointing out was the one pitch that we didn't like from him at the start of the season was his sinker. I thought I thought that he really struggled with command wise of his sinker. And but we saw it improve a little bit in his last outing in Minnesota. And I mean, the outing yesterday was really good. I mean, threw it 28 times, threw the slider 21 times, changeup 20 times, the four seamer 14 times, sweeper 7 times, the cutter only once, but got a decent amount of swings and misses on each pitcher. I mean, sinker, no whiffs, but 8 swings on it. The slider, 14 swings, 2 whiffs. Change the kick change, which was again nasty and probably his best pitch yesterday. 9 swings and 5 whiffs on it, and then the four seamer, 6 swings, 0 whiffs on that. But I mean, overall, like we were saying, it's just he's making slow, gradual progression every single outing he's going out there. And we talked about it, like the one thing that's really hurt Holmes' last couple starts was, he'd be cruising along and then he'd have that one bad inning where it just messes up his pitch count and he gets into trouble and then he's really got to work extra hard out of it. I know he got into some small trouble yesterday. He walked the first guy to start the game on 4 straight pitches and had first and second in that first outing, was able to get out of it. Had I think another inning similar to that, was able to get out of it, but had a lot of clean, 1, 2, 3 innings after that also. And then also, I mean, the fact in that last inning as well, he got the help from the defense where, Brennan Nimmo goes up there and climbs the left field wall to rob Jordan Walker of just a hanging slider that Clay Holmes threw. But I mean, yeah, Holmes is getting closer to that fact where, we can really go out there and trust him to be a guy that, goes out there and pitches consistently 6 to 7 innings a game, and he's only giving up anywhere between 2 to 3 runs a game. And at worst, he's giving up 4 runs a game. But he's getting closer to, like we were saying, that guy that's just you can rely on consistently to go out there and pitch. Because I mean, overall, his final pitch line as well: 6 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, straight 6 strikeouts. ERA goes down to 3.16. So Holmes, like we were saying, I know people didn't want to hear it that you got to take it slow from him, and it's going to be a gradual progression because there were people that were begging the Mets to throw him back in the bullpen, and we said nope, nope, nope. You got to be patient, and so far it's working out. And I just hope that next outing he goes out there, he does the same because I think his next outing he's going to pitch in the National Series in Washington. So he's getting better, and we don't want to throw out the A word yet. I don't think we need him to be the A word because I think other pitchers can step up and be there. But if Holmes just is going to give you this production as a solid number 2 and 3 for the type of money he's on and the type of value he's giving, I mean, again, another very good under the radar signing by Stearns and great adjustment work out of this pitching lab to see the results that we're getting with Clay Holmes right now.
Yeah. So hopefully it progresses. I really wish he was pitching this series against the Phillies because I'd love to see him against like that type of offense and really let it be sort of a like this comment says that this is a benchmark series, and I think that seeing Clay Holmes really have a benchmark get set here against a good lineup would have been nice. It's just unfortunate that the rotations lined up the way that it is here, but
Yeah,
either way, I mean, I won't complain because let him progress. Just let him progress either way. At some point, he will face one of these good teams, and that's when we're truly going to know what we have here in Clay Holmes to see if we could call him the A word or not yet. But we just have to unfortunately wait and see on that more.
Yeah, I think the other encouraging thing with Clay Holmes, because we really saw it in his first outing in Houston, where he really only went sinker and sweeper reliant, and that made sense. That was the two main pitches that he used last year as a Yankee reliever, and probably his two most pitches that he was comfortable working with. But and we really said that as Clay Holmes, he makes these small little adjustments. We really have to see him utilize his other stuff in his arsenal. And I think the other encouraging sign that I saw from him, his last couple starts was against the Blue Jays, where his sinker wasn't working. He threw it out. He went through his other breaking stuff. He went fastball heavy, and he was able to ditch that pitch and then utilize his other stuff. And then now the fact that the sinkers are working well with the other stuff. I mean, if Holmes, he's going out there every start and every pitch is working, and even if the fact that if a pitch isn't working and he has the comfortability and the and he can make that adjustment on his own, that he can throw out a pitch well and still be comfortable. I think that's just another great sign that Holmes is making great progression as a starter.
Yeah, and like DMAC is saying here that the walks were down and he was pitching the contact a little bit as well, which yeah, and he got the defense behind him too to help him with that, which was nice. And the kick change absolutely did look great. And expect more of that because that just that's what we wanted to see more of in that first outing, which is what we were talking about before. Like this is what we wanted from him in that first outing, and now he's getting comfortable. It was a good thing that after that first outing, he acknowledged, okay, I need to be better, and I need to actually utilize, the new tools that I developed because he was going too reliant on what had him be successful with the Yankees, which that's not going to get you volume as a starting pitcher. So yeah, just in terms of other positives, the bullpen once again looked sharp outside of that last game, and then Brazaban got struggled a little bit, but thankfully he rebounded well. Same with Minter in that one game, struggled, walked three batters, but he did a good job rebounding well. The biggest worry, obviously, is Danny Young, and then Jose Budo has not looked good lately, and Nico asked us in the group chat, who's in the circle of trust? And I said, everyone but Young and Budo right now. And then sure enough, those two guys end up pitching that game. It's getting to a point where Budo could be someone that's considered, up in the air when Nunez is ready to go because we know Blackburn's going to come back. And that is your obvious Danny Young cut spot right there. But with Jose Budo, I mean, it could get to the territory where if he keeps looking shaky, you have to consider. And I want Kranick in that spot to get the last batter with the guys on base because I felt, all right, this is where Kranick has been successful thus far. Like we saw him in that Houston game in his first MLB game in years. We saw him have success against Jordan Alvarez, nonetheless. There was another time, I think it was against the Marlins, if I'm not mistaken, where he comes in with guys on base, works out of the jam. So he's had the success where Budo lately, he's not looking good with the bases empty. So I felt, okay, you need to put Kranick in. If you don't want to utilize him too much, just let him get one batter here because he'll get the out, and then let Budo work with the bases empty because this is really what it comes down to is that he might get set down if this is what's going to keep happening. He's getting hit badly, and it's not even just against the top part of the lineups right now. It's every part of the lineup that's getting to him, and it's very worrisome.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I agree with you on the fact that Kranick should have been in after Danny Young left that game with the two outs and the guys on first and second, just because we've seen him get out of big jams. Obviously, the big one, like you said, was that series in Houston where bases loaded and he gets Jordan Alvarez and Christian Walker out, and then the other one was in the Blue Jay series where he gets out of a jam with guys on base. But I mean, yeah, I mean the big thing with Budo is like I think it's just his slider that's killing him because he's hung a lot of sliders his last couple of outings, and that's really had been his Achilles heel for his pitching arsenal. Because I mean, other than the fact like I think he's been okay, he hasn't been great. Because I mean, even then, like he only threw the slider two times. Last outing, obviously the first one was the first pitch where he gives up the the hit and it ties up the game at 3, and then I guess he threw another one later in the outing and I guess it was probably the 8th inning. But I mean, he did settle down the 8th inning. He was able to get that through that inning unshaken. But I mean, yeah, like definitely like other guys have proven it over Budo so far. And I think I agree though. Like the other thing, the reason why Kranick should have been in there is because one, like Budo, and even we saw it last year, like when Budo comes in when guys are on base, he doesn't pitch well in those situations. So I mean, listen, I get it. It was a tough, it was a stretched bullpen. Like the Mendy and the Mets didn't have a lot of options to go in that last game, which is why they had to use Danny Young in the 7th inning. Which if this was another game during the season, like Danny Young would be scrubbing the toilets for me. I don't want him anywhere fucking near the mound for me. But I mean, they had to use him, and it was unfortunate that Budo just hangs a slider in that situation. But I mean, yeah, listen, with the fact that how guys like, especially with Braziban, how he's performing. I mean, Braziban has so far earned the spot over Budo. So listen, if Budo does get sent down, like I'm not going to complain. But I mean, listen, it's also another good sign of good pitching depth to where Budo, where he probably would be a major league reliever anywhere else around the league, and the fact that that he would be sent down and would be a solid AAA reliever again, I think that just shows how much good depth the Mets overall have in the pitching department. But listen, he's got to be better. He's definitely got to be better, and I wouldn't say like he's totally out of my circle. I mean, he's out of my circle and trust, but like he's not like far away like Danny Young is. He's like right outside the circle of trust. He has to pitch better to earn it.
And I mean, this is another name that I thought about mentioning. It's like the Reed Garrett of the playoffs last year, where it's like half of Edwin Diaz is in the circle of trust, half of him isn't. It's that sort of thing because the velo is down, the control is an issue still, which does worry me a lot. But like he's going to be here. Like that's kind of what it is, and they're going to trust him with the money he's making. So it's one of those things where we could sit here and say what we want about him. It's just unfortunate that, no matter what, he's going to be trusted because they have no choice but to with the financials that he's making. But I definitely am worried about certain things with him. And yeah, this is what we were saying. Like Budo isn't good with runners on base, and Budo has one more option. And honestly, it could be a thing where if the bullpen has success with him down in AAA, Budo could be a guy that's an attractive trade piece come the deadline because that's a guy that teams could view. All right, we could either put him back to ramp up to be a starting pitcher and get volume from him, or he could be a solid reliever for our team. So that's something to also keep of note there. But that's also further down the line. And yeah, I'm not disagreeing with the mindset there of you want to save your better arms for the series coming up, especially because you were still in a good spot to win, and thankfully they did win that last game to sweep the series. I'm not disagreeing with the mindset on it because you had to do it, but it's just unfortunate that that was the hand that they were dealt there. But it's also fortunate that they could be in that spot because last year down the stretch, with how far behind the eight ball they were, guys were getting ran into the ground. I mean, we saw with Diaz at the end of last year, he was getting like 30 pitch outings. We saw Maton pretty much every day during series. We saw because those were the two guys in the circle of trust, and we saw Reed Garrett a lot, also Nunez, like, and even Danny Young for a bit was in the circle of trust, and you were seeing him almost every day as well. So it's a luxury, but at the same time, it's you know, it's just a little unfortunate with that situation that they had to use those two guys there. But yeah, I mean, this is what I'm alluding to, that you put Blackburn in over Budo and then Nunez over Young, or vice versa, whichever way they want to go about it. That's the way that I think they have to do it at this point because, like you said, Brazovant's kind of earned the spot right now, and I like the volume that he could get from the bullpen. And then Nunez, I like for giving higher leverage outs. And I'm not sure if Blackburn's almost ready. Like some days he is, some days he isn't. We don't even really know. But I think he started a rehab assignment if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he
So
pitched in Brooklyn for the Cyclones.
he's at least on the way in some regard. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, the bullpen has just been unbelievable thus far for this team. But let me get to some of your guys' comments in the chat. We'll preview the Philly series and head out of here. Just wanted to address some ones that I had starred earlier. How do we think they could get rid of Marte? Because if it was a trade, I think they would have done that by now. Cut him like with Robinson Cano. That's how you get rid of Marte. And you just accept that. All right, we're gonna have to eat the money. It is what it is, but it is more valuable to eat the money and have someone else on the roster than to give Starling Marte the money that he's making. And as the season progresses, it's less money that you have to give to him anyway. So just maximize whatever is left from him, I guess, for a couple of weeks, couple months, and then you cut him. Or maybe a team wants him as some sort of just veteran clubhouse guy for down the stretch late in the season. I don't know how many teams would be interested in him, but maybe there is a team where you could pay down his money a little bit and they'll be like, you know what, we'll take a flyer on starring Marte, sort of thing. I don't know if there's any teams that would be interested, but it's something that could happen, is all I'm saying there. I feel when Alvarez comes back, Torrens should still play behind the plate and Alvarez DH a much better option than Marte. That's what we were saying before, but at the same time, the other problem that comes in, which is what we said, you have to carry three catchers at that point, and then your bench is a little weird in that way. And who goes then for when McNeil comes back? That's the problem there. Enough with baseball musical chairs. DH Vientos, Beatty at third, Acuna second base permanently. I mean, they're gonna play musical chairs until McNeil and Alvarez are back. So I'm sorry to break the news to you, man, but I just think that's how it's gonna be. 9-1 home record, something I like to say. Yes. At least they're making it worth it. That some of these ticket prices have been insane over the weekend series and Friday games.
Listen, it's good to see that Citi Field is, having pretty much a playoff atmosphere in April. I mean, this is something that, Steve Cohen talked about. He basically called out the fan base and said that, I'm spending the money, you guys got to show up. And so far the fans have responded and they've shown up pretty much every single home game this series. I mean this season, apart from that game against the Marlins where the game got moved from 7 o'clock to 4 o'clock, which makes sense because a lot of people, obviously got to work. It's a midweek game, so a lot of people weren't going to be there. But pretty much other than that, every single home game has been packed to the brim at Citi Field, and you could even just hear like on TV, you could hear the atmosphere through it. And it's amazing around to know that this team right now, It's got so many very good players on it. You have an owner that cares. You have a smart GM. You got a good manager. You have a team that's first place for now, 15-7. And the fact that City Field, like we're saying, is packed out mid-April. I mean, it's good feelings right now compared to where this team was. Just think about it 5-7 years ago under the Wilpons. It's such a huge turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, even under Billy Epler for a bit
Yeah.
there. And yeah, no, I agree with this, but the problem is that who goes for Alvarez then when he comes back? Because the idea of carrying three catchers sounds great, but who would go then? Because then you have to get rid of Marte or Winker at that point because you can't have it's not going to be Beatty because then you have no infielders on your bench, and it would have to be one of the catchers that are your backup infielders. So it's like, who goes at that point? Maybe it is Beatty, and maybe they end up sitting, but then you'd have to sit Acuna at that point. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's tough.
It's a tough decision there. McNeil looks good in rehab assignment. Are you comfortable with him getting reps in center field? To be honest, not really, but they also I don't know what choice they really have because Nimmo looks like he can't play center field. Soto's obviously not playing center field, and your only other option there is Acuna, and then obviously Taylor. But Taylor's not going to play every day realistically, so it's like you don't have a lot of options there. And this is the tough part of carrying two platoon DHs, and it's even harder when both of those guys are not hitting at all right now.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think for me, I think that I mean I could see the argument for both because obviously the two guys that are probably either going to play center field is Acuna or McNeil. I could see the argument for both. Like I could see it being McNeil just because he has more of a veteran presence, and maybe they want to give more of that bigger responsibility to a guy is a veteran and has been in the league for a couple of years. But I mean, I could also see the fact for Acuna to where sure he might be younger, a little bit inexperienced, but he's a little bit more athletic. He's quicker. He can move probably in the outfield a little bit better. I I I completely don't know where they're going to go in terms of center field because I'm obviously Tyrone Taylor starting at center field right now, but you're not going to play Tyrone Taylor every single day. He's going to need a break at some point. And as you mentioned, you're not going to play Nimmo in center field. Soto's not playing center field, so it's pretty much only those two. I don't know. Maybe they rotate center field and it's a three-man rotation of McNeil, Acuna, and Tyrone Taylor in center field. I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like I don't know if Nimmo really can play center field. He doesn't look healthy enough to play center field. Like I question if he's healthy to begin with in general. He's definitely not healthy enough to be playing center field right now. That's just my opinion from the looks. And yeah, sure, this sounds simple, but I don't think any team's taking that sort of trade to get for the
No,
Mets to get a top end center fielder,
no.
unfortunately. But we're gonna talk about the Phillies series and then end up wrapping things up here. This is a huge series coming up for the Mets that goes without saying. Really likes it was said earlier in the chat, I forgot who said it, but this is kind of a measuring stick moment here to see where the Mets hang in terms of one of the top teams in baseball. You have Tyler McGill versus Aaron Nola, who has been struggling and is 0-4. Surely that continues. Griffin Canning versus Christopher Sanchez, which scares me because Sanchez is good. And then David Peterson versus Zach Wheeler. So we get the Phillies' three best pitchers naturally, although Luzardo's also been pretty good for them. But to me, this is it's easier said than done how you beat this Phillies team. You get to their bullpen, which I say it's easier
Yeah.
said than done because the Mets have had a knack for not driving up pitch counts at certain points on certain starters. But drive it up on these guys and get to that bullpen because their bullpen has been very shaky, especially Romano, who has been just terrible there. I'm going to say that I'm going to be more optimistic this time around. I'm going to say they take 2 out of 3. I think they win. Um, I'll say they win tonight, and I'll say they win game 3 of the series.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you said, the big thing about this Phillies series is And like you mentioned with the pitching staffs, I mean, Aaron Nola versus McGill. Nola, you look at the baseline, not great with a 6.65 ERA. I mean, he's had 4 starts. He's had 2 starts where he's just been terrible, and then 2 starts where he's been okay. And I know Nola typically pitches well against the Mets, so we'll see how that goes. Sanchez versus Canning. Again, we'll see how that goes. And then the final game, the ace-off, Wheeler versus Results Man. I mean, what other 2 pitchers would you want to see else face up against each other? But yeah, I mean the big thing, like you said, you got to get to that Phillies bullpen because right now in terms of ERA, the Phillies have, let's see, I have it pulled up right here. They have the second to worst bullpen ERA in the league with a 5.81 ERA. The only team that's worse than them is the Washington Nationals with a 7.19 bullpen ERA. So you got to drive up pitch counts. You got to get to that bullpen early because, I mean, even if you look at some of the guys like Jordan Romano, 15.26 ERA, Carlos Hernandez, a 9 ERA, Joe Ross, 7.45. Orion Keckering hasn't been great either with a 4.50 ERA. I mean, also, you have the other top guys who's pitched well. I mean, Matt Strahm, 1.74 ERA, but we've seen even last in the playoffs that the Mets were able to get to a guy like Matt Strahm. Jose Alvarado, solid ERA, 2.53, but, I've watched a couple of his outings of the season. He's been shaking a couple of them, does kind of struggle with the walks. And then, I mean, yeah, pretty much the Phillies offense is as what we expect. Bryce Harper's had a pretty good start to the season with a 1.52 WRC plus. Schwarber 176 WRC plus. Trey Turner's hit well. Nick Castellanos, surprisingly, he's had a pretty good start to the season. So, I mean, yeah, they have a dangerous lineup like we've seen in the past couple of years. Their starting pitching staff is pretty good. I know, like we said, Noah's struggled a little bit, but still, he's a really good starting pitcher. You just got to work bullpen. I mean, you got to work the pitch count, and you got to get to that bullpen as soon as you can.
Yeah, and that's just the way that you beat them, and it's how it happened in Game 4 last year, and even in Game 1 happened most of the series when the Mets got to that bullpen. That's really where they thrived. I mean, we saw it when Estevez let up that grand slam, even though he's not there anymore. But Hoffman struggled there, even though he's not there anymore either. But that's how they beat them. That's exactly how they beat them in the playoffs last year. So, got to have the same. They got to go the same sort of way there. Just drive up the pitch count a little bit more. But
Yeah, I'll
do you have anything
say.
else to add before
Well,
we
well, I was
wrap it
gonna.
up?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think for this series, I'll say they win 2 out of 3. For which games they're gonna win, I'm gonna go a little more selfishly just because we're gonna be at Citi Field for Tuesday and Wednesday. I think they lose tonight, and I think they win the second game and the third game of this series.
Trying to manifest that one. But let's hope we're both wrong and it's just another sweep because if they swept the Phillies, that would be not only a huge measuring stick, but would also give them a really good separation for the division. Not that it matters this early because we won't talk about what happened in 2022. But we're going to wrap things up here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. And we'll see you guys in the next one.